Excellency, today, 26 March 2018, is a historic day for the people of Aceh. Over 100 Achenese diaspora in Europe have gathered here in the City of Peace, The Hague, to commemorate the 145th anniversary of the Dutch declaration of war against the sovereign, independent state of Aceh. That was 26 March 1873. Situated in the most northern part of the island Sumatra, Aceh was once the center of a powerful empire for several centuries and has a long and impressive history of resistance to outside domination. For hundreds of years before the arrival of the European powers to Southeast Asia and for many centuries thereafter, Aceh remained an internationally recognized independent sovereign state, having diplomatic relations with the countries of the world. 145 years ago, the Kingdom of the Netherlands officially declared war against the sovereign state of Aceh, and on the same day invaded our country. That war lasted almost a century, as Harper's magazine had called 100-year War of Today, one of the bloodiest and the longest colonial war in human history. The Dutch historian Paul van Weer made these conclusions in his book, The Aceh War. Holland had never fought a war greater than the one with Aceh. In terms of time, this war can be said to be the 80 Years' War. In terms of casualties, more than 100,000 dead. It was a military event that has no equal in the history of our land. The war against Aceh was for Holland very much more than a mere armed conflict. It was, for a century, the burning point of our national, colonial, and international politics. The Aceh Oorlog, Amsterdam, 1969, page 10. On 27 December 1949, the Dutch gave instead the entire colonial empire for the Dutch Indies to the new entity, the Jakarta-based Republic of Indonesia, not as required by the decolonization rule and principles. Thus, Indonesia became the only successor state to the colonial empire of Dutch East Indies, with a territory as large as continental Europe, from Moscow to Lisbon. There is no getting away from the fact that the successor state of a colonial empire is also a colonial empire by definition. This illegal transfer of sovereignty by one colonial power to another, namely Indonesia, is a flagrant violation of the principles of the decolonization procedures of the United Nations, which stipulated that sovereignty over a colonial territory is not transferable by the colonialist power to other colonialist powers. UN Resolution 1514 XV. In this case, Holland must return Aceh to the Achenese to the status quo ante bellum. Since the Dutch invasion of Aceh in March 1873 up to date, Achenese have never been living in peace. An estimation of 100,000 Achenese were killed during this bloody colonial war. The brutalities of the war was marked by a particular incident of massacre by the Netherlands Special Military Unit, Marshalsea, under military command of Colonel Van Dalen. Around 3,000 civilians, including 1,150 women and children, were massacred in Kotare, Gayo, under the direct command of General J.B. van Hoots, as the Governor-General of the Dutch East Indies in Aceh. For 3 decades since 1976, Aceh once again had become a killing field for the Indonesian Armed Forces, ABRI. And between 1989 and 1998, Aceh was then declared as a military operational area DAUD and ruled by the reign of terror. The atrocities perpetrated through these years have no equal in the history of Aceh fighting against any colonial powers in the past. Arbitrary arrest, extrajudicial killings, routine torture, and disappearance of thousands of civilians have become commonplace. An estimation over 30,000 innocent Achenese lost their lives in military custody, in hidden mass graves, or in secret concentration camps. These military operations continued unabated with the same intensity and brutality. A martial law was then imposed between May 2003 and May 2004. There's another reign of terror once again in progress until Aceh, devastated by the Indian Ocean tsunami on the Boxing Day of 2004. This natural disaster, coupled with the prolonged war, have brought the warring parties, the Republic of Indonesia and the Free Aceh Movement, GAM, signed a peace deal known as Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, in Helsinki, Finland. One of the many provisions in the MOU is the establishment of two human rights institutions, Human Rights Court and Trust and Reconciliation Commission. The Regional House of Representatives enacted a bylaw with regard to TRC on 31st December 2013. But Human Rights Watch stated that the violation in Aceh were too serious to be addressed only by the Truth Commission, which cannot impose criminal penalties. States have an obligation under international law to prosecute serious abuses of human rights and war crimes. The main purpose of presenting this statement is that ASNLF would like to hear from your government about the legal standing of the above-mentioned declaration of war against Aceh. With regard to international conventions pertaining war and peace between sovereign states, in this case, between Aceh and the Netherlands, we feel that our nations are still at war, as long as these historical discrepancies have not yet been settled comprehensively. ASNLF, therefore, requests your government to take a responsibility and reopen the case of this illegal transfer of our fatherland Aceh to the Republic of Indonesia. It is also a cardinal principle of international law that the legitimacy of a state's control over a territory depends on how we acquired the territory. In this case of Aceh, the territory was unlawfully occupied by the Netherlands and then handed over to the newly created entity called Indonesia without due process of the United Nations principles on decolonization. The right of Aceh to be restored as an independent state again is further affirmed by the UNESCO Document 23, 1990, paragraph 42, as follows. It is widely accepted that a group of people that is presently subjected to military occupation that traditionally has formed a nation of its own or has been part of a different nation than the one which occupies it is entitled to assert or restore its self-determination. So by right and by all international conventions, Aceh would have become a free and an independent state again, like it had always been before the invasion. Thank you for your attention. Merdeka! Merdeka!